Well, let's start by discussing how you first encountered one another and eventually came to work together.
I guess
Right.
that's something that Stefan should answer because I do not really remember.
You don't? Okay. Well, the way I remember it is that we started Sonar and we were playing gigs and we were in close contact with Nick Bertsch because we both lived in Zurich and we played at the same clubs, etc. And Nick told me about a recording that you were doing with him, or where you were present. I don't think you played, but you were present. And I sort of, was interested in who you are and Googled you and sort of listened to your music and liked it a lot and saw that you're from the same background as me. You're a little bit younger than I am, but same kind of interests and same background. And so eventually, I don't know how exactly, but we contacted each other, and you came to Zurich at the CD event of our Sonar second album, Static Motion, and you played with us on stage, two or three tracks, and yeah, and we recorded Falling for Ascension a few days later. So like we were already inviting each other to participate in our adventures, and I remember that very well. That recording in Bern.
Well, why don't we talk
Yeah,
about, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
sorry, let me just add something to that. I remember, and this goes way back, maybe in '96, I was at Udo Dziedzanowski's place with Kathy Stevens. He still lives with Kathy Stevens, but I was in the UK. And
Right.
he had a record, which was Radio Osaka, maybe. Is that the
Yeah.
name of the
Yeah.
project? So, and that
Ah,
was
yeah.
one of Stefan's projects. So, already like 15 years before, more than 15 years before we met Stefan,
Yeah.
I knew of you.
Ah, okay. I didn't know
Yeah.
that. Yeah. 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 Yeah, I think Udo was very impressed by one sentence that I wrote on the cover, which was no animals were harmed during this recording. He mentioned that to me, that he found that very very sympathetic statement. It's true. No animals were harmed.
Well, let's talk about Markus's Falling for Ascension album from 2017. Tell me about the concept of that record and how you two worked together to bring it to life.
Yeah, so it was released in 2017, but it was recorded in 2014, actually.
Yeah.
So it took a while to decide that I actually wanted to put it out. And eventually, Nick Bertsch put it out on Ronin Rhythm Records. The concept was like, I had that idea for a long time. Like the motifs, the musical motifs, I had them when I was at my first little keyboard when I was 12 years old or something like that. So it really goes way back, the musical motifs. But I was inspired, obviously, by Nick Bertsch's music and just the label. He was focusing on that kind of music, and I was thinking, okay, there's Sonar, like a great rock band that does, for lack of a better description, minimal music, and I thought it was just beautiful. Like the band itself as a unit has such a distinct sound and character that I thought it would be interesting to add myself into the equation, both with the written material I was presenting, as well as what I was able to add in an improvised way, actually. And Tobias Weber, the other musician who took part in the session, he sort of had a role that was kind of similar to me, where he was like really like improvising, um, even more so than I did in the session. So it was sort of like an experiment, a conceptual record, and I'm still extremely proud of it. I think it sounds really, really fantastic, and is such a very, very unique thing. And somehow, it was things aligned perfectly for this to happen.
Well, what did you two notice about how your collective creative processes and perspectives meshed together on that first project?
I think it worked very well because Marcus had ideas that were very suitable for us to play, and the band reacted very well. And I thought it was a perfect mix of two different voices, coming together. And what I also did is I took two of the songs and did a remix because I liked them too so much that especially the very long piece. What was the name, Marcus? The long piece.
Unconditional.
Unconditional. Right. Right. That's really a piece I love very much, and I did a remix of that, and also another piece, and maybe shows a little bit my perspective of how I heard the collaboration, because Marcus did the mix himself, so I wasn't involved in that. But the playing was it was a very great set, a very good session. I remember that very well.
What was particular? Go ahead.
I'm sorry, just what was kind of like interesting for me is that because I had to get to know the band and also had to get to know Stephan. And over the years, I learned many things from Stephan, but also about Stephan that, like now in hindsight, they also make sense. And I realized, like, of myself, I was never thinking that I was the wild guy, right? I never considered myself to be the wild guy. But in the context of how Stephan was working, really, what I was doing, like, I was pretty wild. And that was interesting to see how there's like, it can take on different characters, the artistic expression, and also wildness or focus. Focus can be on very different elements or parts of the creative process or of the music itself. And I think that was sort of like the most fascinating for me, to see how we were, so friendly with each other that we could just allow things to coexist. And that's why I think that our collaborations are pretty special.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, if I understand correctly, the next collaborative piece was Clocks Go Down in Wonderland from 2019, which of course you revisit on the new duo album, Promise of a Better World. Tell me about that collaboration and then the process of reworking it for the new album.
Well, first you would have to mention the Fractal guitar albums, because they were very important. When we were recording Falling for Ascension, Marcus told me if I want to do a record with him, he would be very interested. And I sort of thought about it, but at the same time, I was thinking about doing an album with other people, with other drummers, and also with effects, because in Sonar we didn't use effects, so I wanted to revisit my effect rack, and so I invited Marcus to play on that record, which he did phenomenally, I think. I remember the first track he sent me, I was blown away. It was so great, and it fit so perfectly for that what I wanted to do. So that was really for me the second beating that we had on the Fractal guitar albums. But you're right, of course, the first track that we did as a duo was the Clocks track, and that track I also love very much, and we put it out not as a CD or an LP, just digitally. So when we did the record now, we wanted to record that in a format that we could have a physical product, which we now have in form of an LP. Sorry, was that the answer to the question? I don't remember what the question was.
The idea was just to get you to reflect on the making of that first collaborative piece.
Yes. Yeah. So what may be interesting for you, Anil, because like my back catalog. So the foundation of that Clocks Go Down in Wonderland piece is a kind of process that I designed originally in 2005 when I recorded my Trepanation album. And I call that accumulations, or an accumulation. So there is a certain technique where I'm sort of like it's a cut-up technique from guitar loops, where I'm layering the guitar loops in a rhythmic fashion, and that was the foundation, or that was the piece, the foundation of what Stephan then worked with to build his composition around. And then obviously we made overdubs on that. But in a way, it was for me a beautiful thing, because I was able to sort of like take an old process that I had not looked at for a while, and I was able to just reapply that. I mean, thanks to Stephan, and also because like I was like less interested in rhythmic, in composing with rhythm, let's say, for a long time. And Stephan reignited that in me.
Do you remember how it started, the piece? I'm thinking that it probably started with the organ pattern, and then you added the rhythmic loop on top of that, if I remember correctly.
I think that's true. I think the first was your like a MIDI demo version of that organ pattern, and then I created this accumulation to that. Exactly. It really was. It was literally you inspiring me to go back to that old process of mine.
Right. Yeah.
Well, let's discuss a new album, Promise of a Better World, in more detail, with a focus on its title track that explores very much Terry Riley-inspired directions. Describe its structure and how it came together.
Maybe I start just saying what the foundational material was recorded as part of our Rothko series. Our Rothko recordings, and it was recorded in Hansa Studios last fall, so fall 2024. And there's going to be another Rothko release that Stephan and I just completed. And but in the process of working with that feedback guitar material, Stephan is always very how shall I say, like he doesn't really commit quickly to an idea. So he would try different things. So he tried these rhythmic approaches, and he tried the purely ambient approaches or orchestral approaches, and basically decided later on which camp, let's say, the piece would fall into. And so that was sort of like the interesting thing about this, that it is. My recordings come from the same sessions as the Rothko 4 album, but Stephan's approach really comes from a completely different place.
Yeah, but do you remember, that was exactly my feeling, that while we were recording the Volume 4, I sort of thought, this sounds like more than just Volume 4. It sounds like something that could be something else as well. I didn't know it at the time, and I really experimented a lot, trying things out, and doing pieces with your improvisations, and just finding the right tone for these massive guitar feedback explorations. And I remember the moment that I put the basic riff of the piece, which again is an organ riff, together with your improvisation, and it was a perfect fit. It was like, I have to do this. And then the Terry Riley thing, I remembered the Terry Riley piece, and thought I'd like to do a long 20-minute piece, where we really explore these riffs and patterns and how they interact, and how your improvisation builds up and makes really a very interesting piece, I think.
So Markus, tell me about the unique environment and setup that led to how you captured your contributions to the title track.
So it was recorded at Hansa Studios in Berlin, which, like, famously, Robert Fripp did record the Heroes feedback guitar there. So look, which just has nothing to do with our session really. But luckily, and we had recorded for Rothko Spaces 2 we had recorded at a studio in Dresden that I already knew very well. So I knew that, you know, that kind of approach would work there, and we were very happy with the results. But anyway, we wanted to work in Berlin, locally here where I live. And so we went to Hansa Studios and we set up, and I have to say it was really magical because the setup was complicated. I can't remember now. 4 amps maybe we were using, and there was
I think
really
even more, yeah.
there was
Five
a
or
huge yes there was like a huge orange amp, like an orange amp, and it was just beautiful. Like the instrument was just so sensitive, and you have to imagine like the touch guitar is a very sensitive instrument anyway already, but now with that air vibrating around me, and I had my earpieces, and so it was so incredibly loud, right? So, but just touching the instruments ever so slightly made this beautiful, or created like a whole world of sound within just that one note. And that's sort of like what I was working with. And it was not so much about like playing the right notes or the right pitches or even the feedbacks. They were go crazy sometimes, you know, they're microtonal sometimes, and but we didn't mind that really, and I didn't mind that, and I just tried to paint a picture, let's say, with sound, but also very differently from how I would approach a solo recording. Like in a solo recording, I would have to make sure that the composition is fully realized in the performance. So working with Stephan, it was amazing because I don't have to do that. Like I don't have to make it a complete, fully realized thing, because I know that he's gonna fill in whatever is needed, or he's gonna like massage it in such a way that it's gonna work out and pick the pieces that work, right? And that's what we did, and that's what was my main contribution. Obviously, later in the production process, I maybe said something, but I do trust Stephan in his decisions 100%. So most of the other work was really his.
Stefan, why don't you elaborate on your role in that creative process?
Yeah, well, Marcus explained it very well. I went home, you know, and I had these fantastic tracks, and the first thing I do is I listen to them, you know, for hours and hours and hours, and I put them on my computer, so I have all the tracks, so I can mute certain things and try other and make other things louder, and you know, just play around, just follow my intuition. Things that I like or don't like, maybe I will discard, but eventually I have a picture of what the album could be. And the second step is then that I start adding my things, and sometimes there's not much needed. You know, maybe I will double one of his voices or just add something small. And sometimes I will completely rearrange the piece and do something on my own and just add his parts. So it varies. I just do whatever what comes to my mind and whatever feels right. And then eventually I get a picture of what the album will sound like.
All right. Well, Mr. Terry Riley just turned 90 a couple of days ago. And of course, as we discussed, the track is inspired by Terry. Let me get both of you to describe the importance of Terry Riley to your musical psyche.
For me, it's via Tubular Bells, actually. I would say that is the most definitely the biggest influence that Terry had on me, not directly, but indirectly. Um, but then, like discovering, was it Rainbow in Curved Air? It's called, right? Um, that was a revelation for the way that basically the sonic treatments that were possible in the 60s sort of like became part of the texture, but not just of the texture, also of the composition itself. And for me, his works that sort of like include the technology are, for me personally, are more successful than just like in C, for example. Even though I appreciate it and I know that it's a pioneering piece of music, but I really like the fact that there was a composer who took control of the sound of his music, and that was part of the creation. And that's really what I think Terry Riley is even more so a godfather than, say, Brian Eno. Well, everybody talks about Brian Eno, but I think Terry Riley is really one of the figures that really brought that approach to life in the 60s.
Yeah, for me, it was more I think Poppy No Good is one of the pieces, a long improvisation with tape loops that, I connected with what Fripp was doing and with this for Frippertronics. And I just very, very much liked the way he improvised and used his organ and his saxophone to create these loops and hour-long concerts. And I also loved the fact that, he was somebody who obviously was an improviser, but he was also a composer. And he composed these pieces, especially the pieces he composed for Kronos were very influential for me. And I just love the way he evolved in time, starting with these improvisations and then getting more and more like a more classical orientated composer. Something that, I sort of wish that Fripp would have done, been more evolving into a composer, which he never really did. But I liked the fact that Riley did that and the way he did it, and the quality of the music is just. I remember I saw Kronos playing Sun Rings. It's absolutely stunningly beautiful.
Well, give me some insight into the title, Promise of a Better World. What are you both communicating with an auspicious combination of words like that?
Well, it was my idea. And funnily enough, that title was on my list of title ideas for 2 decades, I would say. So really, it's not a political statement. It's not an advice. It's not a wish. It's not a hope. It's nothing really. It's just for me. For me, titles are meant to create a mood and a vibe that is sort of like beyond what the words actually mean. But obviously, what the words mean is important, really. So for me, it just really fits the vibe of the music. There is a sort of, and maybe that's something that Anil actually should answer. But for me, there is like the question is like, why are we here, right? Like, what can we contribute? And for me, that what I would hope for is that like the little contribution that I can make, that it somehow makes for a better world, and even if it's just for 20 minutes.
For me, it was when I was working on the piece in the beginning, I had the working title was Morning Flight. Remember, Markus? Because I had this vision, like if you get on a flight very early in the morning and it's dark, and then the lights you get into the air and the lights come in. That was just the feeling that I had, and what it also has is something very positive. It's very energetic, but it's also very positive. It's a positive kind of energy. So when you proposed the title, I was immediately 100% behind it, because it has this positive energy which I would wish for a better world.
All right. Well, you mentioned Rothko Spaces, and of course, you collaborated on Rothko Spaces Volume 2 and the forthcoming Rothko Spaces Volume 4, as Markus said. Stephan, why don't we have you talk about the overall concept for this series, and then Markus talk about how you intersect with the concept.
Yeah, for me, it started when we had David Thorn over here in 2023, I think. Yeah, no, 22, sorry, 2022, and he was playing on Sonar's album, Three Movements. And I remember that session so well because it was such a great session. It was 2 days in the studio with David, and we were already experimenting with lots of feedback. So he was playing incredibly loud, and it was a fantastic sound in the room, and it was a big feedback, and also the way he used his loop machines together with the feedbacks. I thought that was something very interesting. This combination that I never really heard before from somebody, combining feedback with tape loops and digital loops. So I really loved that recording. And then I remember later on, I listened to his tracks without the band, just his individual tracks. And my feeling was like, this could be a piece, just the way he played it could be a piece, but maybe I would add a little bit, similar to like the way I added things to Markus's performances. So I started, just for fun, I started putting some strings on it. And then I heard this and I was, hey, this is exactly what I had in my head when I saw a Rothko painting. I heard this sound, this combination of feedback guitar, very, very violent, because Rothko is violent, and also this big string orchestra. The combination of these two sounds was for me something that I hear in my head when I see a Rothko painting. So I had this idea that I would do this Rothko Spaces project, and the first record was with David's tracks from the Sonar recording. And Markus heard that and he liked it. So my thought was immediately, hey, let's do it. Let's also do something like that, with his touch guitar. And when it all went very quickly, like I finished the record with David, and a month later we already had recorded tracks for Volume 2. And I think Markus took the concept even further, with the feedback, and it was, really something that we didn't do with David. Like, we put microphones everywhere in the room. There were microphones in the piano. The piano was vibrating, and we put microphones in the cellar where there was a special reverb. And I mean, the whole house was like, there were microphones or the whole house. And it was really not just Markus playing his instrument, he was playing the whole house. And I really found that fascinating. And that's how Volume 2 evolved. Then I did Volume 3 with John Durant. John was also interested in trying something out. And then Volume 4 again with Markus, and Volume 5 again with David. That's also finished. And there will also be a Volume 6. And then I plan to put everything in a nice box. And so we have a Rothko Spaces box with 6 CDs. That's the plan.
Yeah, for me, it was interesting because I had heard Rothko Spaces 1, and I was initially kind of like overwhelmed a little bit, in a good way, with the sound and how it worked and how Stephan recomposed or added parts to it. And then what I sort of try to do with the recording for the second volume is very different from what I did for the fourth volume, what I said. So with the second volume, I wanted to sort of create a more definitive mood with each improvisation, let's say. So that's why on Volume 2 you find some pieces that are more, not in hindsight, but back then, more monolithic from the get-go. Like the very first, like the sound check that I played is track 1 I think it's track 1 on Rothko.
Track 1, yeah.
Volume 2, yeah. Right? So, and it's just one drone that it was so great. I had played maybe 3 notes or something, and the room was shaking, the house was shaking, and it was, and Stephan said, that's it, and became sort of like the centerpiece of the album. And so it was, with that recording, it was more about like setting this one huge, humongous sound that really could work on its own. And with I don't know what you think, Stefan, about that.
Yeah, I remember what was so special was, yeah, like you said, you did the sound check, you played these notes, and then there was a loop going on. But it, more normally a loop will repeat after 20 seconds or 30 seconds or whatever. But this loop never repeated. It was like generating sounds itself, and it was like, what is going on here? I don't understand this. How did you do that? And it had something to do with the way the feedback changed the sounds, and it was just, we could just sit there for as long as you want, and it was just interesting what was going on. So that was a great start to that album. Yeah.
Like one of my looping concepts is totally in the box, so in the computer, using a feedback network in the computer. So I'm very, very, very versed with like using feedback in my improvisations. But
Right.
for the sessions with Stefan, I did not use the laptop in such a fashion. So I was only looping, and also only looping like short phrases, like maybe 8 seconds, 20 seconds at the most, something like that. But I let the room do the feedbacking. So which is much more subtle. You could think it's much more subtle, but it's also much more physical, because it's actual air fighting for space. And so that means that the timbre, and in particular, I think with the Dresden recordings with Volume 2, was just so incredibly rich. And what I wanted to say for Volume 4, I really didn't care so much anymore about, as I already said, to kind of like present something final, because I was thinking, okay, so here I wouldn't want to repeat what we did with Volume 2, and let's keep it more open so that Stefan could do new things, and he did, and he really excelled at that. I think that album is really a huge step forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially if you listen to the Dolby Atmos mix. I mean, that is really something. Robert Rich, he did the mix for us for the Dolby Atmos mix, and I recently I listened to them. I don't have a setup at home yet. I want to do one because I love Atmos so much. But I was in a studio here in Romania, it's new for me, this studio. And I was just sitting there, and this was just incredible, because naturally with Dolby Atmos you can put the voices on top and the back, and it's just such immersive sound. And I love the stereo mix, but the Dolby Atmos mix is really one step further.
And speaking of that, Promise of a Better World, we also mixed in Dolby Atmos. This is sort of an important feature of that work, because Stefan kind of conceived the composition with that in mind, which I think is something really unique, that you can now start composing for a format like that, and then you could either think of reducing it down to stereo, or you can think of it as the stereo mix being a different space. And I think it's fascinating. I'd encourage people to check out the Dolby Atmos versions.
Yeah, and it's also the way I work is, there's a lot of stuff in what I do. There's a lot of voices, and also, if you listen to the Fractal guitar albums, for example, there's so much going on, and there's so many layers, and I don't know if people hear that, because I tried to mix it in a way, or some of the albums were mixed by you and Benny,
Mm-hmm.
but the idea of the mix is that of course you can hear everything, but physically, stereo is just hard to make all these voices really audible. But with Dolby Atmos, it's easy. All you have to, if you want to hear something, a voice, you just put it in the back, and then everybody knows this voice is there. It's in the back. And so it really fits the way I like to compose and layer things. It really makes it much more, you can really sense what I'm going after much better in the Dolby Atmos situation.
Well, you've been talking about the Fractal Guitar series, and why don't we explore that in a little more depth? And of course, Markus, you play, mix, co-produce these projects. But again, let's start with you, Stephan, because they are, I think, at the core reflecting your vision. So talk about the framework for the series, and then Markus, why don't you talk about how the two of you collaborated to realize them?
Well, I didn't know it would be a series. It's just we did the first record, and I didn't call it Fractal Guitar 1. I just called it Fractal Guitar because I thought it would just be one album. But it was so fascinating for me the way it worked. The way I could invite people to play on it, and there's tons of guitarists. All my friends that I love so much could play on it, and I could really, Sonar was a very special concept, but for me, Fractal Guitar had much more freedom. I could do whatever I want and mix things, the craziest things together. So it was really a good format for me to experiment and to try things out. And yeah, eventually the second album was also done. That was done during COVID, I remember. And I'm sorry, I'm distracted by the cat here. It's running around. So the second album was just a continuation of the concept. But for me personally, it's my favorite album. I love the second one so much because, it was also it was a great time. Let me get this guy. He's such a big part of what I'm saying now. Come on. Guy here.
Special guest, okay.
Special guest, yeah. We were, it was 2020, and we just got the cats, and I met my wife a year earlier, so we were very much in love, and we were at home all the time because of COVID with the cats, and I could do a lot of music, and it's just, for me personally, it was such a wonderful time. And I think this is reflected in the second guitar album, this positive energy, and the concept was the same, and it's not a big difference to the first album, but it's really the album that I personally like the most. And the third one was also, it evolved very naturally. So just pieces that I was doing, and I also worked for the first time with Eivind Arset, which I find is a absolutely fascinating guitarist. And we were playing on an album together with Jan Peter Schwalm. And so I asked Eivind if he could also play on Fractal Guitar, which he did. And so the third album is very much also working with him and his ideas and his effects and his sound.
Before we continue, for people that don't know, what does the phrase fractal guitar mean?
Well, it doesn't mean much. It's just, basically it's the idea, if you play a guitar, if you play an acoustic guitar, you play a tone and then the tone dies away after a few seconds and it's gone. And with an electric guitar, you can add effects so that the sound goes on. For instance, with a delay or with other kinds of effects, that just the tone is like you start an adventure. You play the tone and then something happens. So this big journey starts playing. And somehow when I was doing this with the delays, it was like, for me, that I saw the picture of a fractal. These little things the little delays that keep going on and getting softer and softer, and it was just an idea that fractal guitar for me means guitar playing which which has a lot of, it could be delay, but it could be also something else. Just you're not just playing one tone like you usually play in a guitar, but you're using the effects to make a journey out of each tone, so to speak.
And exactly, that's sort of like what I contributed and still try to contribute is some sort of wildly experimental fractal guitar. And it's funny because over the years, Stephan has gotten more into simplifying things, like even more, right? Like I think
Right.
Fractal Guitar, the original album, is maybe the most experimental, monically and you know, I was doing like these chromatic things, and you know, like I'm always also with the newer projects, I'm trying to sneak in these chromatic notes that you wouldn't expect, and
I noticed, yeah.
and really, it's not necessarily always meant to be something that ends up on the album, but something that kind of like you know, it's like the pointed stick for Stephan, you know, to really kind of like, you know, and I think it works really well. I'm also not, you know, that's also so great working with Stephan. I'm not precious about any of my parts when working with him.
Yeah, that's one.
It's
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
just
I really,
that's just such a great thing.
I really enjoy that. I mean, it's a dream for a composer to get material which is good, and you can do whatever you want with it. That's you know, there are other musicians, you know, who are very, very picky about what you do with their sound. They don't want you to change anything. They don't want to change the notes. But Markus is completely open, and I love that. You know, I can take his performance and turn it upside down. It's okay for him as long as he likes it, of course. But the freedom I have using his material is really something that I enjoy.
And you see, my philosophy about that, and that aligns with the fractal guitar idea, is that I sort of put all my intention and love, let's say, into what I'm doing, so that I can, so that I believe, I have to use that word, so that I believe that it can't get destroyed. Like no matter how you massage it, it does not get destroyed. Or even if you take only part of it, everything is in there. It's sort of like a holographic idea, you know,
Yeah.
fractal. And
Right.
and I think that that whole project, as you say, also having sort of like friends, you know, like many people, like a community work on these albums is pretty special.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm doing Fractal 4 right now, so it's gonna continue the series.
Can you give us a preview of what that will be and who's on
Um, I don't know yet for sure. I asked Ivan again if he could play on it. He hasn't sent me anything yet, but I have asked him to play. Markus has played something. John has played something. I'm going to the studio in October, and Yogev is coming. Yogev Gabay, the drummer, who I absolutely adore. And so I think it's coming together, and I'm open to what's going to happen. I have some pieces, and we'll see. It's going to be good, I'm sure.
Well, I'd also like to discuss the three new solo albums you're collectively responsible for. And I thought we'd start with you, Marcus, and the Truce 3 album with Fabio
Mhm.
Trentini, A Soft Circus, and its companion album, Love Drones. Talk about another series of albums and the third piece of that, and how Love Drones reflects a different angle of it.
Yeah, first of all, I think I think it's sort of a privilege to be able to make series of albums, and it's sort of a new art form in a way, which wasn't that common, or still isn't that common, but because it's actually, in my case with Truce, it's a band, you know, it's people that play together. And the first Truce album was such a surprise for me. It was initiated as an idea to present myself as a lead guitarist, something that I had not really focused on before that album, and
As a
continued as
shredder,
such.
shredder, right?
As a shredder, yeah,
Shredder.
which is something that I really rarely like enjoy doing myself, and hardly. I mean, I've started doing that with Stickman a while ago, but and that album gave me an opportunity to find an environment, a musical environment that works, and where also musical exploration can happen. So the first album was like still is one of the most favorite things I've ever done, because it has that freshness, and I was able to sort of open up to a new world with that. The second Truce album was the first project that I initiated during COVID times, where it was like, as you remember, not really allowed to get together as a group and blah blah blah. And we did this in Italy, and it was a whole, like, quite a different process and really a completely different vibe. Sort of, as one can imagine, more depressed vibe. Even though like we tried to play normally, but it just didn't work out that well, or that way. And what happened is that even though I think the album is good, but it's nowhere near to what I would have wished for that project, or how I wanted that project to go. So that's why the Truce 3 album was actually necessary for me to make. And I just had to find the right moment where, spiritually, let's say, I could be sure that we would, somewhat be able to return to the freshness of what we did with the original Truce album. And so we got together in December 2024, and we were in the studio for 1.5 days, and we played and played and played. And we came up with these, I think it's 10 pieces, 10 relatively short pieces, between 3 minutes and 8 minutes or something. And it was absolutely magical. It was really magical. And it's mostly, I have to admit, I don't think it's because of me. It's because of the other guys. Fabio being really, really very much a pop guy. He has absolutely an impeccable taste for pop music, and in pop music, and playing melodic bass lines and writing melodic melodies and stuff. And so his playing is the foundation of that album. And Asaf and I, we can just, like, because Fabio is really such a, I don't even know if I don't want to use that cliche, but he really is the Zen guy. He doesn't know that he is that guy, but he is. He plays that foundation, and then everybody else can exist on top of that. And that is the beauty of that project, where Asaf and I, the drummer and I, we can sort of like interact on top of his foundation in a way that is melodic, still exciting, even exciting for me, like harmonically exciting. It can be furious, it can be slow, and it can also be there can also be lots of space, or it can be very dense. And the statements can be short, the statements can be long, and it's just one of my favorite projects. And I think, and a lot of people have said that it's their favorite, one of the favorite albums that I've ever done, which I appreciate hearing. It's sometimes difficult for me after almost, I don't know, 30 years in the business, that I can still make albums that are better than the old ones. It could be seen as a good thing or as a bad thing. But, yeah.
And what about
it's a good thing. It's a good thing.
It's a good thing.
It's a good thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I find that I too belong to the people who think that this is one of your best works. It just feels right, and the sound is phenomenal. Really, I mean, this record sounds so great, and what you described is just correct. It feels so good, and you feel so much at home playing. You can really sense that. It was a wonderful album.
And so there's a companion album called Love Drones. Talk about that relationship to the main Truce 3 record.
Yeah, thank you for asking that, because it's kind of difficult to explain in writing, but it's very simple, because like the three of us, we start playing, And the first thing I do is I feed this feedback system in my laptop a few notes that I play, right? And then those notes, they start generating this background soundscape that has the harmonic information. So like Fabio, before we start playing, Fabio plays a few notes and says, okay, let's use these notes and blah, blah, blah. Then I come up with like an extension of what he plays. So I can sort of like, throughout a piece, I can also change the harmonic context to what he's doing. But I start with that knowledge and I play those notes into the looper, and then the looper plays in the background while I'm soloing or, developing melodies on top of the band playing with the soundscape going. And so for Love Drones, and that idea just came by, I listened to those because my friend Eric Emil Eskilsson, who is sort of like working as an engineer for me, he was working on those soundscapes to remove like phase issues for the mix. So even before Fabio was mixing it, we were treating those files. And so I was sending those to him, to Eric, and then I listened to them and said, wow, this could be an album. And what I ended up doing is I went through all the recordings we did on those 2 days, which was, I think, 4.5 hours of music, and only some soundscapes that are actually on the Truce album. I think maybe for 3 or 4 pieces ended up on Love Drones. The other pieces are from other improvisations that are not on the Truce 3 album, but they were recorded in the same fashion. And I think it's just a beautiful thing. It's, in a way, it's sort of like the reverse project of what Stephan and I do with Fractal Guitar, where we're by basically combining things to make the whole. And here it is, like the band with Truce, we play the whole, and then I was able to pull out these parts from that. And yeah, I think that, thank you, Stephan, for saying that Truce 3 sounds great. I think it does, but the Love Drones album, I think, is maybe the best sounding album I've ever done, from my personal perspective. It has a certain Reuterness about it, like it's very, very, you could say, cold sounding in ways, but I absolutely love that. It has really this sort of the sound of a chrome plated tower. This is sort of like the image that I have when I hear that.
But do you add other tones later in the piece, or it's just really those few notes that you play in the beginning and then the loop machine doing the rest? Or did you? I had the feeling that you while you're playing, you add certain notes maybe.
Yes. Sometimes I'm just adding more notes during the piece, and also I'm also like the soloing that I'm doing on Truce has an extra treatment track as well, which is using a special pedal that is also doing a sort of like a glitch treatment, and those tracks can also be found in the Love Drones album. So it's really a combination of the side what is it, like the side products of the main part, really. Yeah.
All right, well, Stephan, your latest album is Worlds in Collision, which features David Torn, members of Fractal Sextet, and Tim Harries. And I understand it thematically relates to Eno and Burns' My Life in the Bush of Ghosts. Tell me your thoughts about this record and what you were going for.
Yeah, it started with an email that I wrote to Fabio, and Fabio's the keyboard player that I work with, who lives in Rome, and I mentioned that I was doing some tracks with a lot of percussion and sort of like Eno Burns style. And he said, "Whoa, I love that Eno Burn record, and you think I could also contribute?" And I said, "Of course." And then he also said, "Well, do we want to do voices as well?" And that's something that I didn't really plan, but the moment he said it, I was interested. And he told me that he had ideas in his head that he never really realized, where he would cut up the vocals in a very interesting rhythmic way. He would use some kind of a gate and take for instance, a drummer would play something and he would use a gate so that the voice would be cut exactly like the snare or the hi-hat or the kick drum. So you have like the voice is like a rhythmic instrument. And you can also distribute the sounds in the stereo field, so you can really do some absolutely fantastic things with voices, which he did. And he sent me a few things, and we started working on these tracks. And yeah, that was the foundation for that. And also David came in, and originally it was just going to be a quartet: David, me, Fabio, and Yogev. But then John had some great ideas, so we eventually incorporated a few of his tracks. And like you said, I also used a track, but I mean, Tim Harris never played on the record. It's just I had a track where he played on, and I took the bass. The things that you can do nowadays with in a DAW with a DAW. You can digital audio workstation. You can just take any performance and put it on and mix it with something else. So I don't know if Tim has ever even heard that, but he played the bass on another track. And I took that bass and used it for one of the tracks on Worlds in Collision. And the same with a percussive track that Manuel Pasquinelli, the drummer of Sonar, played. So now they're not really playing with the piece. They just gave me stuff to work with. But the other bass player, Ian Allison, that was somebody that Yogev wanted to work with. And he has these amazing bass sounds, and he worked on one of the tracks. I wanted to use more of his stuff, but at the time didn't allow it. But he's on one of the pieces, which he really the things that he did on his bass were amazing on that track.
Yeah, I think, Stephan, that's interesting, because I think this work is sort of part of your canon of exploring what is possible with your approach, basically, right? That's sort of how I see it, that you're applying your compositional approach to different kinds of materials. And with Fractal guitar a little bit, you were starting to work with other people's contributions as samples, right? And here now with this album, that is the main focus, like you say, with the voices, to really treat them like samples and not like performances, and also like taking the bass player's parts and doing that, and I think it's very interesting also with that reference to the My Life in the Bush of Ghosts record, that somehow, even though that approach, let's say, and that aesthetic was such a big thing in the 80s and all throughout like the mid 90s, I would say, or late 90s even, it has sort of fallen behind as something that is kind of like publicly being admitted, let's just call it that way, right? Where almost everything is kind of like pieced together from samples when it comes to modern pop production, for example, right? And so I really like that with this record, that it's such an in-your-face thing, and especially with the voices, it's something that is sort of originally I was expecting it to be like more embedded, let's say, but it's actually a lead part, and everything seems to be a lead part, and that is sort of like really cool. And in a way progressive, because that is something that lots of people wouldn't dare doing that, to be so kind of like open-hearted, let's say, about presenting the samples in such a way. And then with the structures and the rhythms that you compose, it's really a truly unique record, I think.
Yeah, well, a lot of credit has to go to Fabio, because he was the guy who pushed me in a certain direction in the beginning. He was like, I asked him, for instance, one track could you play a piano on that piece? And he said, no, I don't want to play piano. There's too much, too many notes. You know, I don't want to play anything melodic. I want to just use crazy sounds and crazy samples and you know this thing about the Eno has, that being a non-musician, you know, doing stuff which a musician wouldn't do. That was one of the basic ideas for this record, which was quite new for me, because usually I think very musically, but in this case we were trying to be more like non-musicians, you know, really like people who just go crazy with sounds and rhythms.
Mhm.
And Worlds in Collision is a very dramatic album title. Is it relating to the musical content or something else or both?
Again, that was Fabio's idea. He proposed that title, and it was, you know, I mean, there's, if you take the title track, I mean, the stuff that's in there, it's from so many different worlds. Like there's a Bartok pizzicato from which is a very typical sound that Bela Bartok invented, and there's trip hop stuff going on. There's a classical quartet playing. There's string orchestra. I mean, it's just, you know, you take whatever feels right for you from the enormous palette that you have on sounds and styles, and just create your own personal mix. So that was, in a sense, the title that Fabio proposed was right. They are worlds that are colliding, musical worlds, sound worlds.
All right. Well, I'd like to shift gears a little bit here. Both of you have dealt with multiple labels, different ways of releasing music, released music yourself. What are your thoughts on where things stand in terms of, you know, the art of creating attention for and selling creative music?
Well, I'm very, very bad at it, but I'm still much better than most people. And that's so shocking to me. Like when I say to somebody, no, I can sell 50 records, for example, and I talk with like somebody who's just at the beginning of his or her career, right? Like it's shocking to me, you know, like I realize, okay, like I can say, okay, I can sell 50 records. What does that mean to the person that has no experience yet, you know? And it can be, again, can be a good or a bad thing. The and I've seen and heard lots of opinions about this, that there's some people believe that really without some sort of platform, that your social media platform that you're active on, it is impossible to reach anybody. And that may actually be true. And funnily, in another interview I did yesterday, somebody asked me for my social media information, and I said Bandcamp. You know, sort of presenting Bandcamp as a social media website, which it should be, and it's not really yet. It should
No.
be. So I have to say, I and both Stephan and I, we like to invest into what we do. And I don't want to call it like product, but into what we do, into what we want to present to the world. So there wasn't just a big question about doing like the promise record, you know, the vinyl. I think it was just sort of like, okay, that's what we're going to do. And if we may sell 20 copies, we may sell 60 copies, right? Something like that. We don't know. And we still do it. And I think that's really the foundation of how I look at the market these days. Is I will create the product anyway.
Right.
And the missing factor really for a lot and most of us people, I don't know if it's an age thing, but at least, or a niche thing, where like we're missing some sort of link to the world of contemporary marketing. Yeah. And like with the Truce 3 record, I tried it. I tried videos, and I paid for on Meta, on Facebook, on Instagram and Facebook, and spent $300, I think, or something like that, with absolutely zero effect, nothing, no response whatsoever, not a single sale, not a single click through to the Bandcamp page. Anyway, for me, it's worth trying these things, but also seeing like, okay, those $300, dollars I'm never going to get back. It's unfortunately, and this is why I'm pointing that out. I think it's about a very specific knowledge and a very specific motivation is needed for somebody, and that could be the artist themselves or somebody in the team, a skill that allows somebody to communicate an artistic project, which is what we do, Stephan, right? Like it's clearly artistic projects we're doing, and not commercial projects. There is something that is very, very rare in our world, which is people that have that skill set that want to work with artists of our kind. And I say kind, but maybe it's also not about the kind, it's also about the pull that we potentially could have. And I think if there is, and again, like if I think about this, like, do I have to be 20 years old and do I have to be female, or do I have to sort of like want to, go topless, let's say, or not? How important is that?
Oh, Markus, right? please go topless. Yes.
I would even do that, like to an extent. But no, that's not it for it. For us, there is no solution like that. And some people say, and I think I've heard that even in relation to Vivian Stanshall. I heard that about Vivian Stanshall recently, that Vivian Stanshall himself said that, that he is not not selling the music, or is not selling it's just the way he dresses, the way he looks, the way he talks. So the personality, that is what draws the people. That's what kind of like creates the marketplace in a way. It's not the record. Right. And I think it's true for so many artists that realized, and I don't think of Elton John. I don't know, maybe he realized that wearing those glasses is what brings people to his shows. I'm just kidding here, but and I think there's always this element, and that's sort of like the big struggle. I will always keep putting out my music, making it available, but within the last 10 years, I think I have lost people in my audience. I've lost more people in my audience than I've gained. It's a sad fact.
Mm. Yeah, I feel the same. And well, I mean, there's a big difference between us. That must be said. That I don't really have to earn money with music. You are a professional musician. You have a family. You have to earn money. I don't. So that I always earned money by teaching math. So that was my job, but I'm retired now from doing that. But so now I can concentrate on music. But my financial side was taken care of. So in music, I could do whatever I wanted. And for me, it was always important to create things. That's something I have to do, you have to do. We have to create things. It's just in our nature. We can't exist without creating things. And so that's what I think is my job. I just have to produce something. It's something that I have to do, and I don't really care that much if I sell 100 or 1,000. It's not, it's a number in the end. I mean, what's the difference between 100 and 1,000 really? It's just a number. And what's important for me is that I get feedback from people who are, just today I got an email from somebody who says, I'm sitting in the garden and listening to your music, and it's such fantastic experience. Stuff like that, where you really get this appreciation from not many people. Of course, there's just a few dozen or a few hundred maybe. But I have the feeling that my music is appreciated by some people, and as long as I have that, I will keep going. And I'm a really bad PR person, and I hate spending time doing PR stuff, and so it's not my job. And I think Bandcamp is a great format. I also go on Bandcamp looking for music. If I want to find something new, I go to Bandcamp, and I think that has huge potential for the future. That people, if they would know about Bandcamp, a lot of people still don't know about it at all. It's just a fantastic platform where people could meet and listen to new adventurous music.
Well, what would you both ask of listeners who appreciate the types of music you're both involved in when it comes to supporting and maybe even helping to promote, to the larger world?
Yeah, Neil, that is really the big question, or it's the big ask, really. And unfortunately, say regular people or friends and fans, they are also not equipped to do that. It's like the modern technology, I'm talking about the internet, does not allow that anymore. I think like most people are not aware of how regulated, let's say, to use maybe a slightly more positive word, actually, like the internet is, and mostly like the big social media companies. Let's not even talk about Spotify and stuff, right? But on Facebook, like you as a fan, you post about your favorite artist, the favorite artist that is not in some way paying into the system is not going to get featured. Like your friends are not going to see your social media post. You may believe they do, but they don't. It's not that they're not interested. Like if you get 0 likes, I see so many people that share my music on their Facebook pages or Facebook profiles, and there's 0 likes on it. There's not a single like on it. So, which to me basically means this is not even shown. This does not show up in anybody's newsfeed. And so yeah, what can you ask of those people? I think in the end, we need to remove the middleman. We need to go back to direct mailing, sort of newsletters, and encourage people to actually be in touch personally by responding to emails, and also then taking advantage of real, like how can they put their dollar into your pocket? That's what they need to start thinking about, and like more closely. And Bandcamp is a great solution for that. But I think there's also something beyond this, which should ideally ideally that would be completely independent from any social media or even website. Like ideally, as a musician or as an artist, I don't even have a website. Like there's not a place where people can go to and sort of like passively interact by simply consuming. I think the solution would be that everything is just directly one-on-one, artist to fan based via email. And if we wanted to be extreme, we could even say, maybe let's go back to snail mail, right? Which doesn't work anymore, right? But in terms of like what kind of connection is needed to the audience, that would be the thing. And actually physical, a piece of paper, somebody's written something. And that's why whenever I'm sending out CDs and I'm here at the office, like I put a little note in, I say, thank you for ordering, or something like that, or best wishes, and like an autograph. I mean, just my signature, as a thank you. And I think it's that kind of like we need to take, and I mean, when I say we, I mean the artist, but also the audience needs to take control back into their own hands and into their own hearts. Sounds ridiculous, but it's true. You need to kind of like understand that you have a responsibility. Like if you want the creative person to keep giving you food, let's say, you need to give them food as well. And that's sort of like my perspective, and that's what I would like people to understand.
Yeah. For me, I'm not really interested in convincing people to like my music. I'm aware that what I'm doing is not for everybody. So I'm not really interested in, going to somebody and say, "Hey, listen to this. This is great." But I'm convinced that in every big city in the world there are 10 or 20 people who really like what I'm doing and would really be interested in hearing that for me. So it's just, how do I find these? How do I get these people to know me? That's the question. If there was some kind of consensus in the world where to go to look for certain things, then they would find it on Bandcamp, and then there would be, how many big cities are there? Thousands. And if 10 people are in every city, then you have tens of thousands. So potentially, I'm sure that a lot of people would like my music, but how can they find it? That's really the question. Internet changed a lot of things. It used to be, if you're playing somewhere in Switzerland, not many people will notice, but unless you have a big label, of course, which pushes you. But now with the internet, it would be, it must be possible in some way that this could work. That people who are looking for something, that they could find it. That's the thing. I remember when the first Guitarcraft course I went with Robert Fripp, I told him, "Oh, you must make bigger advertisements," and he said, "No. I'm just a small notice somewhere, so that somebody who's really looking for it, he will find it. Only people who are really looking for what you're doing, they should find it. Not, you don't want a big notice which overwhelms people and say, 'I'm the best, listen to my stuff.' You just want a small notice somewhere saying, 'If you're looking for this, you'll find it here.'" And that's kind of my hope that this is possible.
Yeah, it is interesting how the internet evolved or perhaps devolved. Interviews has been online since 1994, and ironically, it was easier to connect with people at the beginning than it is now, with all the incredible manipulation you have to do and the brick walls that the social media companies have placed in front of us. So I certainly understand it as well. It's fascinating to have everything be so corporate controlled now. I wish the average person understood the filter that
Mhm.
Through which everything they're consuming, is now going through.
The convincing that Stefan was talking about is an interesting concept, an interesting idea. I think that there are several levels of convincing, right? Like the convincing is not just, it's not that you have to convince somebody of the quality of your work or anything. It's the attention that people need to make available so that they can discover your work. That's sort of like what we're really talking about, and that has been just completely taken over by technology in ways that are not clear to us at all anymore. And I wonder if the people who created those systems actually know what's going on and how they really work still. It's sort of a big black box for a lot of people. And sort of that's why I'm saying that ideally we'd go back to the piece of paper, to the newsletter that is being mailed out, and you would actually get responses. And in that context, in that old context, what Robert Fripp said makes total sense, right? But on the internet, that humbleness, let's say, oh, they will, like, in a way you could say they will learn, right? Like, I'm going to start 15 minutes early. If people come late, oh, they're going to learn. That's sort of like an old fashioned, like an old man attitude, I really have to say. And like that simply does not work, like being on time. Obviously, that's like I start the show at 8 o'clock. If it's promoted as starting at 8 o'clock, we start the show at 8 o'clock. And that's sort of like how communication also about pieces of art need to happen. You have like a clear, people need to be sorry, I'm jumping around here with my thoughts. Like what's the name of these websites that list shows?
Like aggregators.
Yeah, there are some aggregators that provide Songkick, I think is one of them, right? Tour dates on Songkick, and there's another there.
Hansa Town is
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And like those services, we should never forget, like they're dealing with data just like Spotify or Facebook is. So even those, like I will see an announcement about Devin Townsend coming to Berlin, let's say, or Steven Wilson coming to Berlin. But I don't really see like the things that I would like to know, let's say, because I already know when Steven Wilson's coming to town, right? So in a way, you can see that there's sort of like the underlying algorithm, which is paid for by somebody or not. But I think in the end, somebody pays for the fact that Steven Wilson is being promoted to me in a newsletter that goes out to 25 million people or whatever, right? And that is really the factor. And this is something we need to be aware of, that as long as we give our data away to those people and expect them to work for us, you need to know they are not working for us. They're only working for the people that give them something in return, or not people, companies that give them something in return. And that's why, if I'm really, really honest, like actually like removing myself from this digitized world would be better for me. I'm absolutely sure that if I was not available on the internet, I would be getting letters in the letterbox. Right? But like this, people don't think they need to get in touch directly.
Well, the fundamental contract of social media broke, particularly for artists, but everyone as well, because originally the construct was you follow someone, therefore you will receive all of the posts that person posts. Very basic. It was a fundamental thesis of Facebook when it first started. And as we all know, as you mentioned, Marcus, you're no longer guaranteed to see what you actually want to see. And instead, it's algorithmic manipulation based on myriad corporate and bias components. Yeah, I don't know how we get past that, or if we ever get past that, but the idea of Bandcamp becoming its own social media platform is an interesting one. Let's wrap up this interview on a more positive note. And Stephan mentioned, the fact that he will continue being a creator. He will unleash music at a prolific pace, as you do, Marcus, independent of whether or not the market comes along for the ride, because at the end of the day, it's about your burning need to express yourselves. So the question is, what keeps those creative fires burning for both of you so brightly, given the incredible volume of music you put out there?
I recently thought about that, in the sense that I'm not really a musician that performs live very often, contrary to Marcus. So I have a lot of time at home, and I can create music at home. That's what I do. I don't have to go on tour and play a song 300 times. So I don't have to spend my evenings repeating music that I've already played before. I can constantly do new stuff, and that's really what I'm interested in doing. I always am interested in what I'm doing right now. It's just the moment is important, and all the ideas that I've had in my life, I want to find a new way to express them, and it's just something that comes very naturally and very intuitively for me, that I just have to do. I have to think about what interests me, and I have to try things out. And often I wake up in the morning, and the first thing I want to do is just try something out that I thought of the night before, or it's just in my nature. I don't know. And I mean, I've asked myself, what would happen if nobody would listen to what I'm doing? Really nobody. Then I don't know what I would do if I would really do it just for myself. But that's not the case. There are always people who are interested and writing to me and looking forward to new stuff. So as long as I have that, I'm very happy to continue working.
Yeah, I guess it is, as Stephan says, it's the passion for the subject matter, really, that keeps me prolific. It's also that I have established, like, let's say, certain workflows that really make it possible to be at the service of music, let's say, because that's how I see it. It's not my decision. Like, if I'm, like, oh, I need to create the situation in which music can happen. That's sort of my responsibility. And even though I'm extremely prolific, out of the year, I'm not, it's not that I'm making new music every single day. Like, maybe it's 2-3 weeks out of the year, but in those 3 weeks, I'm creating a lot of music. Right? So it's not that it's time consuming in that matter, in that sense. Anil actually pointed out something to me a while ago, which we were sort of like not arguing about, but like discussing. Is like, okay, when you have too much stuff that comes out, people also are overwhelmed and lose interest, and like even though like what you may be putting out, Stephan or me or us together, just the sheer volume of it is also adding to the noise, right? And the interesting thing is that like the noise, like the number of music or songs that are put up onto the streaming services every day is enormous, right? And so my argument with Anil was that, okay, like if I'm not putting out my 12 albums a year, somebody else is going to put out those other 11 albums, right? and even though it's not a solution to the problem, I completely agree, and it makes things hard and harder and harder. But for me, it's not an option to hold back, because that would be the other end of it, of the stick, right? Like why would I restrict myself in terms of like creation? And maybe, I mean, I could be producing from my shelf, let's say, right? I could have everything sitting there, and then I could say, okay, once blah 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 in 25 years things look better, and I can release all like 50 albums of stuff, right, of great music. And that is just not the way things work for musicians generally. We need to stay motivated and putting out the music, and as you say, Stephan, just getting feedback from a handful of people, or people requesting more music, or wanting to talk with you about music, or it's just what keeps us going. So that's why I think the lesser evil for myself is to actually just follow my intuition, and I keep making music when the opportunity arises.
For anyone watching, in terms of the argument, as it were, it had nothing to do with creativity or being prolific. Rather, I think both of you have sometimes, had one album out as a new release, and then 2 weeks later there's another one, and then a week after that there might be yet another one, or a remix album, or something like that, and it's great and it's wonderful. And rather, the concern is, in this day and age, where people, have the proverbial fire hose, of content coming out at them. How does one mitigate that? And I totally understand what you're saying and where you're coming from.
The issue is that in the traditional structure, let's say, there was management, right? And there was management that was maybe even by doing what they do and sort of like doing it well. If they were doing it well, they were creating a demand, right, for the music, for the artist. So they would make sure that the artist doesn't write 500 songs in 3 years, right? And that may actually have hurt the artist as well. Like we should never forget that, some people, artists that we love, would have made much more music if management wouldn't have been there.
Right.
Yeah. So it's also a sad thought.
I remember this thing that Robert Fripp said about, he recorded his Exposure album with Daryl Hall as a vocalist. And then the record company of Daryl Hall said, no, this is not going to happen. We don't want his voice, released on a release that's not Hall and Oates. So they forbid it. And this was exactly the thing that I always hated. Record producers saying, no, we're not going to do this. This is we're going to lose money if we do that. So forget about it. For me, it's always about, artistic intentions. If somebody wants to do something, if I want to hear it, I want to hear it. And I don't want somebody to, tactically think, oh, it's better if I wait a year and then I can sell more. I don't really give a shit about that, selling more or not more. I want the people who are interested in the work that they can hear it. And so that's I mean, a while ago, 20, 30, 40 years ago, a record company would say, no, you only release a new album every 2 years. But why does that have to be the case with people like us? I mean, with Bandcamp, you can release an album every day. There are people who do that. And of course, I can understand somebody who says, oh, it's just too much for me. There's so many artists that I love. They're bringing so much stuff out. But okay, then leave it. It's no problem. I mean, you'll find what you're looking for if you really look for it. So I provide the material. That's my job. My job is to provide the material. And what people do with it, that's their choice. And it's fine with me. But, I'm not thinking business-like. I always hated business. It's the last thing that interests me, money making and with music. And for me, I just want to do it. I have
Stephan,
to do it.
You were also an employee. Don't forget that, right?
Yeah,
That's,
I know.
That's why that is. But
but that has its good side and its bad side. The thing was that when I was like 20 or so, I went to my father and I said, I'd like to be a musician. I'd like to study music. And he said, no way. I'm not going to support that. You'll starve to death if you become a musician. I want you to do something really right, it's like a scientist or something. And so I was a very obedient son. So I did what he said. He said you can do music, on the side, and so but you have to have a proper job. And I did what he said, and I mean, in a way, it worked out very well for me because I have enough money. I never have to worry about anything, and musically I can do whatever I want. That's the good thing. But the bad thing is that in the back of my head, I always have the feeling, oh, what would have happened if I really, decided to be a professional, and maybe my life would have been totally different, and I would have created much greater stuff and would have been much more culturally important than I am. It's always in the back of my head. So it's always, two voices in your heart working against each other. You never know what the path not taken would have given you. But the way I'm working now, it's okay. It's great for me. I'm glad that I had a job which paid well, and it was an interesting job. I didn't suffer or anything. And I did music anyway, so it worked for me.
I mean, let me add something just here that may sound a little dark, but I think what I'm doing is going to kill me. I really think so, and that is something I need to how decide if I want to continue what I'm doing and being really stressed out by trying to make a living. And I mean this like in an actual physical, literal sense, to actually like I need to survive, right? And what is
But the
happening with
difference
what?
is, the
Yeah,
difference is as soon as you have a family, you know, if you just kill yourself, I mean, that's your choice.
exactly.
If you destroy yourself, so to speak, with staying up all night playing music, that's your choice. But if you have a family and there are people who are dependent of you, that changes everything. You know, that
Yeah, but
really.
what I'm saying, it's not the playing of the music that is the killer, right? The killer is that um, there is no infrastructure left. You know, that is the problem. That I'm also asked to provide the infrastructure, to be the person who sells and who puts, you know, but anyway, I don't need to explain it because I think it's obvious, right? And but what I just wanted to say, and I think that there's somebody said that, maybe Charles Bukowski or somebody said that you need to do something that, or, you know, you need to love it so much that, you know, it can, or it's okay if it eventually kills you or something like that. I am, and you're absolutely right. You know, as a father, that is not an approach that is valid anymore. Like, as if I could be like, yeah, still be living, you know, on my own. You know, I don't need any insurance. You know, if I get killed, I get killed by a car or whatever. But now with a child, you know, that's just something else. And like the point I'm making is, uh, it's the infrastructure we're talking about. And that's why I'm so grateful for Anil to always be pointing out these things, that the listener or the fan, the people who are part of the who bring the music to life, let's say as listeners, that they need to understand that they are part of a system where where the middlemen need to go so that we can create some sort of infrastructure that works. And obviously, let's say, this is never going to work on the grand scale. Like, not everybody who is making music can live from making music, right?
Right.
And anyway, and maybe I belong to that group, you know, like it's possible. And it's just that this kind of conversation is just so difficult to have. And I hardly ever, like, there's so many people that are making YouTube videos, as we know, like, and they're pretending to be like being fully open, or like also going deep with these subjects, but they never go there. They never really go to this point where they say that it's going to kill them, right? And and anyway, the reason why I said that it may sound a little bit dark, but I think the fact that I'm aware of this means that it's not going to kill me, and that I will find a solution, and I have an awareness for where I stand. It's just that with the current situation, um, things are just so bleak, and the only perspective really that I can take and share with you is actually the one that, yes, we're going to put out that record anyway, right? I just ordered another set of 100 vinyl discs for another project, because I think, yes, this is my investment, right? This is my
Yeah.
investment, and it's correct. It
Yeah.
is part,
That is,
it's become part of the composition, let's say, right? Part of the production is that we also make a decision in which format to release it, and then to say, okay, so this is my shout. It's not that, as it was before, you make the music and then somebody else takes care of that. Right?
right. Yeah, I think that's something that I didn't think of that much, is that, you know, if you put something out, you sell a few CDs or LPs, and then you get some money. But the long-term effect is surprising for me. You know, we sell a lot of Sonar records, but Sonar hasn't played for over 2 years. But the records keep selling, and money comes in. And I mean, if you do a lot of stuff, a lot of records, and every record will bring you 50 euros a month, then you have a substantial income if you have 50 albums.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, unfortunately, not everybody is.
Yeah, not every. You're right, of course. Yeah.
I mean, going back to the stress factor, Marcus, I mean, there's no shame in, I believe, in doing something for that income, you know, in tandem with the musician work. We have so many countless examples of even, you know, extremely well-known musicians that have realized that, you know, the business of trading and recordings, especially, much less live work, which people, of course, are delusionally convinced pays big bucks to people. But at any rate, I mean, someone as talented as you, I would think there are many other realms you could apply your expertise, you know, as a tradesman.
Exactly, and that's sort of what I am doing and what I have been doing. But to tell you the truth, and I'm totally open here, I'd rather be the greatest guitar player in the world, which I could be if I was actually playing. But I don't have time for that. Like I said, maybe I play three weeks out of the year. I actually work on the instrument with the instrument. Yeah, then there are like live shows, and I'm really grateful I have those because the live shows have become my practice. Really, so you see, like the way that things have devolved, right, are just so far beyond what people on the outside can understand. And I know, and that the problem with that is also that from the outside, it sounds like you're being negative, but it's not being negative. Like even just stating a fact, like, you know, like the money that Spotify gives people, or that you have to have 1,000 plays now of a track before you even get your money, right? You say, like Stefan said, okay, maybe you have a certain amount of tracks and each track makes $5 a month, right? Would be great. But that doesn't apply to me. I have 2,000 tracks out there, right? But none of the tracks even gets to the 1,000 limit. So that means that all of my catalog, if I were giving it away this way to Spotify, for example, right, means like it would be available to everybody in the world to stream for free. Yeah. But I will still be getting nothing. Right. And this is just so, I'm not going to use a swear word, but it is really, really, really sick. Yeah.
What's interesting too is there's been so much public education about the fact that things are the way they are. Maybe 10, 15 years ago, the listener could plead ignorance, but everyone's now aware of the dramatic inequity and the monumentally adverse financial consequences of streaming, and yet barely a blip from the listeners and the consumers as long as they get what they want for their either free or for 8 to 12 to $14 a month.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, the sad thing is that there would be solutions that would even be profitable for businesses, even, right? But it's the well, we don't need to talk about this, but there's certainly something on the spectrum of good and evil, like where things are really far into the direction of evil. And like more recently, I've seen the Spotify CEO spending, or even buying weapons of mass destruction factory or something.
Yeah, every penny generated by Spotify is somehow linked to investments in the military industrial complex. It's quite stunning. And again, this has been widely reported on as well, and it does not seem to have affected consumer behavior in any way.
Yeah. Yeah. And anyway, so like if you allow me, Anil, we're just going back to the actual art, to the music. I think even though both Stephan and I were not overtly political and really, as you were asking about the titles, no, they're not political at all, right? And but I think the music is. I think the music really is a statement, is like, you guys are trying somehow, or not trying, not consciously trying, but the system is trying to silence us in a way by, making it impossible. It's just, I mean, in the case of Stephan, it's different because, he can afford that. But it's trying to silence, and I'm using this word, I know it's not correct, because they don't even know who they silence, right? Because we don't exist, right? So the thing is that the music itself, the fact that we are making these productions, that we're actually going into Hansa studios to record feedback guitar, how amazing is that, right? And that's sort of like what I love about working with Stephan, right? And because we kind of agree on that level, we say, okay, we're going to do we're going to create the sound that we want to create, and we want to put it out there in a way that it looks professional, it sounds professional, it is as good as any record ever put out in the last 100 years, all right? And that's sort of what we do, and that is a political statement. Unfortunately, I wish it wasn't, but it is.
Yeah,
All
true.
right. Go ahead, Stephan.
Yeah, a good place to end. I should just start.
All right. Well, you two have both been very generous with your time. I appreciate it very much. I think there's a lot of great insights that have been raised here. So, and thank you for all of the incredible music you two put out.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anil, for being such a great force in the music world. Helping people, and I mean, helping me personally. I mean, the things you did for me, the connections you opened for me, are just simply amazing.
The music is worthy of the effort and investment.
Great, thanks.